Welcome to the Paul Leslie Hour, your source for quality interviews with interesting folks. In this episode, we're joined by country singer-songwriter, recording artist, and Sirius XM radio personality, Dallas Wayne. As Ray Waddell of Billboard magazine said, if you don't get Dallas Wayne, you ain't country. So help keep the Paul Leslie Hour going. Just go to thepaulleslie.com/support, and we thank you. So let's get this talk going. Paul Leslie and the Big D, right here, right now.
Hello, hello.
How you doing, Paul? Good to see you.
Hey, good to see you. I'm doing well. How about you?
Doing fine and dandy, living the dream, playing hillbilly music on the radio. Yeah, it's a good Monday.
Good. It's so good to see you.
Good to see you too as well. Looking forward to this.
Absolutely. Well, I'm talking to someone who is a part of the life of myself and so many of you who are watching. We are joined by Dallas Wayne. He is a singer, songwriter, recording artist. You also hear him all the time on Willie's Roadhouse on Sirius XM. And you've got this new album coming out. It's going to be out April 22nd, Coldwater, Tennessee. It's a great pleasure to have you on here.
What an honor, Paul. Thanks for having me. And yeah, I'm real excited about the new record. It's going to be a busy Friday.
Yeah. Well, the one song, I was listening to it not long ago, I hit the road and the road hit back. And there's a line in there. I thought I knew it all, but I didn't know Jack. When you think about the young Dallas Wayne who was starting this music game, what goes through your mind?
Oh, my Lord, I didn't have a clue. After 50 years now since I started out, I think everybody feels this way. They all have a certain ideal of what the music business is all about and what show business is and how glamorous it can be and that kind of thing. But it's also a long slog. You know, it's a wonderful time. I wouldn't trade it for anything, and I wouldn't have traded any of that 50 years for nothing. But it's a little slightly different than what you think it's going to be. Always is, as is life in general.
Well, speaking of the, it's not always what you think it is. What was your misconception going into the music business?
I didn't realize. I kind of thought it was an all or nothing type thing. Either you become a huge, big, giant star, or you starve to death. But there's a way to kind of have a happy medium to where you make a living in the music business. You can raise a family, you can buy a house, you can do all those things if you just keep working hard at whatever opportunities are presented to you.
One of the other songs I want to talk about, it's got just, I think, a great vocal on it. Both you, and then there's the old school kind of speaking part that you don't hear so much anymore. And I'm talking about He Even Brought Her Flowers, which you wrote with some great songwriters. I'm hoping you can tell us about that song.
Well, I started that song quite a few years ago, actually, when I was living over in Europe. And I always kind of liked it. And I'd finished the form of the song with all the verses and everything like that. But I really wasn't that pleased with a good portion of it. And so, but I knew there was something there. So I enlisted Bill Anderson and Buddy Cannon, who was Buddy, of course, is our record producer for this album for Coldwater, Tennessee. Two Hall of Fame songwriters that I got to help me clean that up a little bit. And of course, when Bill Anderson does a recitation, nobody does it like he does. And I try to include a recitation on almost every one of my records, mainly because of the radio work and things like that too. It's something I'm comfortable doing. And I think it's a lost art form in country music. But when you had the opportunity to have Bill do that recitation, it sort of brought it all home for me.
I'm glad that you keep the recitations alive. It's something that more people should do. It should be a part of more country music today.
Well, you look at all the great songs from back in the 50s and 60s and even into the early 70s in country music. a lot of those are songs you will never forget that are recitations, because it's just so powerful, because it's a lot more intimate than maybe singing a melody all the way through, and you can actually sit there and talk to the listener one-on-one.
As you mentioned, a couple of Hall of Fame, Nashville Songwriters Hall of Fame co-writers on that, Buddy Cannon and Bill Anderson. I mean, that's pretty good co-writing company.
It's pretty tall cotton, I got to tell you. I am honored to have both of those gentlemen as friends, as well as collaborators now at this point. Not only Buddy for producing this record, because this whole record was Buddy Cannon's idea to do, and I'm just so proud that he decided to help me produce this record. He offered, and I just was flummoxed. We're friends, and we've been friends for a long time, but I thought there's friends, and then there's holy cow friends, and Buddy Cannon's one of those. So is Bill Anderson. He's been so good to me. The first time I ever played the Grand Ole Opry, Bill was the one that brought me on. And he's always been a good champion of what I do. And we talk baseball about every other day, and a whole myriad of other things. But Bill and I and Buddy are actually going to be doing this song on the Grand Ole Opry on May the 7th. I'll be back on the Opry that night, and Bill's on the same night. So we thought it'd be kind of fun to do He Even Brought Her Flowers.
Oh, wow. Well, we'll be looking forward to that. What does it feel like when you step on the stage of the Grand Ole Opry?
There's nothing like it. I've marveled all the years. I don't think I've ever been nervous stepping on a stage, with the sole exception of the Grand Ole Opry. The first time I did and stepped into that circle, was singing, and your mind kind of drifts when you sing. A lot of times, because you're concentrating. Okay, you're assessing everything. Is my pitch okay? Is my timing okay? Is the audience liking it? Is the drummer speeding up or slowing down? You know, all these things come into your head, and they're cycling through there as you're singing. And I came to the turnaround on the song that I was singing, and I stepped back from the microphone, and I realized that my legs were actually shaking, which is something that I don't think's ever happened to me in 50 years of doing this. I always felt comfortable on stage, but there's something about the Grand Ole Opry that I will never, ever take that for granted. It's such a magical place. And when you step into that circle, you're there.
I've been listening to the advance that thankfully I got of Coldwater, Tennessee, and I appreciate very much. Your vocals are really great on this album. Can you tell us about the singers? What vocalists have had the biggest influence on Dallas Wayne?
Boy, there's a bunch of them. Merle Haggard, of course. I'd be remiss without saying Willie, because I love his phrasing, how he phrases certain lines, lets them linger, speeds them up kind of for urgency, that kind of thing. I look on people like Vern Gosdin as a great teacher. There was nobody finer in country music, and there's a ton of them, and they're all influences. Lefty Frizzell, going all the way back through that, and of course through Hank even. Those are all big influences, and I think they shape a person's vocal style. I think you're a product of our your own generation.
We were just talking about having this guest phrasing from Whispering Bill Anderson not long ago. Has there been someone you have always wanted to do a duet with that you haven't had a chance yet?
My biggest regret would have been Ray Price. He was another one of my teachers, and I always loved Ray. Loved his vocal styles, and his phrasing and his tone was about as good as anybody. But I've got a pretty good bucket list of folks that I've already had a chance to do duets with, like Willie, Jeannie Seeley, and Bill Anderson, a bunch of different people over the years like that. I love singing with other artists because it shows. It's more of a how do I want to say this? It's more of a collaboration that way, that it's a total sharing of not only the lyric and the melody, but your presentation in general. And that's something fun to do in the studio always.
There've been a few artists who have recorded your work that really are just, I mean, wow. Who has done one of your songs that really just knocked you out?
I think I have to say my favorite is the Jeannie Seely Willie Nelson duet of "There's Not a Dry Eye in the House." It's just it's always been one of my favorite songs, and probably if I had to pick one, it's probably my favorite song out of my catalog of all time. I love the melody of it. I love the simplicity of it, and to have two of those heroes grab a hold of that song and treat it so well was pretty special.
I had Jeannie Seely on, and I have to agree. We talked about that song. It is just that is a knockout song.
Oh, I love the intimacy of it between those two. You can tell they're old friends just by listening to them sing together. They're quite comfortable being with each other on the record, and it was a special moment for me. I was pretty knocked out because I kind of pitched it to Jeannie as kind of a last minute thing. I'd written that song with Ray Price in mind years ago and recorded it myself. Did pretty well, okay with it, and but then to have Jeannie and Willie do it was just that was a big cherry on top of my cake.
Does it feel like you have a closer connection to your fans because of the fact that a lot of artists they come out with an album every year, every other year, but you have the added uh, benefit of you're on the radio. People can hear you all the time. Does that create a closer connection?
Oh, I think definitely so. That I don't think there's anything more special than the one-on-one relationship that you can have with your listeners. You're talking directly to them
Hmm?
every day, and a lot of our listeners, I might be the only live voice they hear all day long. They might be living out in the middle of nowhere somewhere, and that's the beauty of satellite radio. Its reach is just phenomenal, and it's a wonderful experience. And a lot of my listeners that I've been fortunate to stay with me for all these years have become friends. And some of them may be virtual friends through the internet, but I can tell you what their kids did on graduation night, 2 years ago, and that kind of thing. And it's special because uh, the interaction between listener and host on a radio show is something that I don't think will ever go out of style. There's a lot of different ways people are listening and getting their music these days, but they still turn on the radio when they want to hear somebody. And I think that's special. And I love it, especially when businesses have Sirius XM on
Hmm.
in their place of business, because that is the ultimate compliment you could ever possibly get. Shows us that they trust us with their clients, with their customers, and that's a pretty heady responsibility, something to be proud of.
There were some times where I had a job that required an extensive commute through traffic, going all the way through the heart of Atlanta. And I wrote this piece about you guys did a special with Willie Nelson one time, and I started out and I was just hating this drive. And by the end of the drive, you made me kind of like you guys made me kind of like I was happy to be in traffic. It was a strange thing.
Oh, well, that's wonderful. Thanks. Yeah, it does hopefully help the miles go by a little bit faster. And it when you get somebody like Willie on the air with you, you don't have to do a whole lot. He does most of it, and it's because he loves his fans as well, and he's an old radio guy too. A lot of people don't realize that, but Willie spent a lot of time in radio, so he has that in his toolkit. Plus, he's a great person just to relate one on one with folks.
Well, Dallas Wayne, when you're making a record, is there a guiding philosophy for you? Something that's like a guiding mission when you make a record?
I usually have a plan mapped out, and after 13 plus albums now, I've got a way I like to do things. One of the great things about this record was I turned over all the production to somebody who I trust, which is Buddy Cannon. There's no better set of ears in this business. There's no better producer with a good heart and a good soul that everybody that works for him wants to work for him. The musicians, the engineers, everybody just adore him. And it's a really special thing to see. And Buddy this time took a lot of pressure off of me. I let him pick the songs. I sent him about 20 songs out of my songwriting catalog, some stuff that I've written, some of it going back 25 years plus, and just sent him a big pile of songs with just guitar and vocal demos. And because that's how he said he wanted to hear him. He didn't want to hear him if I'd recorded before. He didn't want to know anything about it. He didn't want to be reminded of the arrangements or anything like that. So I turned it all over to him, and boy, did he treat these songs right. He took a lot of them in ways that I was kind of surprised, pleasantly so, that he did. It's like in the back of your mind, you're thinking, why the hell didn't I think of that? But he's such a gracious guy to work with in the studio. And, he's got the ears, definitely.
So what do you hope someone gets out of the experience of listening to Coldwater, Tennessee?
Well, it's a pretty broad expanse of stuff I've written over the years. And of course, the new one with Bill and Buddy. And I just hope they get a sense of me as a songwriter. That's all I ever really wanted to do, was write songs. That's why I got into this business to begin with. And the two previous albums that I released were collections of country covers called Songs a Jukebox Taught Me. There's 2 volumes of that. And so over the past couple of years, I'd kind of gotten away from songwriting and that part of who I am and who I want to be. And so this album afforded me to do that. And I hope people will be reminded that, hey, this guy not only is the guy that annoys the tar out of you every day on the radio, but he also does a little bit of picking and singing too.
Dallas Wayne, has there been a compliment that you've received through the years that means the most to you?
Yes. And I thought about this the other day. My parents were very supportive, don't get me wrong, about anything I ever wanted to do, but they had the problem, as so many people do, of not understanding the music business. It was something so foreign to them. Both of them were in education. My father was a college professor and my mother was head of teacher certification for the state of Missouri. So I came to the music business sort of out of left field for them. And one year when I was living in Nashville, I just moved there, been there about a year and a half. And I hadn't called home for a couple of weeks. You know how kids are, and I was just a teenager. And I'm pulling into the driveway to my house where I was living there in Nashville. It was a big, long driveway going up the hill. And I look up at the top of the hill and I think, uh-oh, that's my dad's truck. He'd been over in Kentucky for an interview at a university over there and decided to just drop down to Nashville and see his baby boy and see what was actually going on. And it couldn't have been a better week. I had a bunch of gigs, had a recording session. I took him to the recording session, a songwriting demo session for another songwriter, and was singing on it, and had a couple of shows. And I remember after him being there for a couple of days, he was putting his suit bag back in the truck, in the window of the truck. And he turned around and he said, "Son, I don't understand a damn thing about the music business, but I think you're onto something. Keep doing what you're doing." And that meant more than any kind of praise I would get from other fellow artists or anything, because it's what all of us want as children. We want validation from our parents, whether we admit it or not. And that kept me going for a lot of years. And it helped them understand it too, him seeing it up close, because the only time they'd ever seen me play and sing was in some honky tonk somewhere. They'd come out for the weekend or something like that, and there'd be fist fights and loud drunks and obnoxious people, and it's like, what in the world has our boy gotten into here? But that was a big validation for me. from him. And he didn't have to say that, but I'm sure glad he did.
That's great. Well, it's been a great pleasure to be joined by the Big D. I feel like I've known you forever just because of the hours that I've spent listening to you. But everybody go to dallaswayne.com and also be sure and follow on the social media. There's always lots of really interesting pictures, and it's a good way to stay in touch. And of course, listen to Willie's Roadhouse, Channel 59 on Sirius XM. Thank you so much. Are there any last words for this interview for our listeners out there?
I just hope people pick up the album and enjoy it. It is probably the album out of all of them that I've ever done in my career that I'm the most proudest of. I really like this record, and I hope folks do too.
It's great. April 22nd, Coldwater, Tennessee. Please, folks, pick it up.
Available wherever fine records are sold, because it's not in the fine records section. It's right there next to it. There's another little section next to the fine records where they put ours. So pick it up. We'd love it. Paul, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to visit with me today. Appreciate you.
A great pleasure.
Be safe.
All right, sir.
Adios.
Godspeed.
You too.
You know, the Paul Leslie Hour is made possible by people like you, listeners, viewers. Please go to thepaulleslie.com/support, and you'll know what to do when you're there. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who contributes. Performance of The Entertainer intro song by John Primorano. And of course, this is your announcer speaking. See you next time on the Paul Leslie Hour.